which that's all right. It's a good thing. Of course, I'm going to very much so say the same thing that Barry said when he got up here. I want to appreciate so much your attendance, the elders here, the work that has been put in to host this. I was talking with Brad just a moment ago. He said there were 63 total people. If you look around here, you know, there's 20-something in here. There's at least 30 kids down in the basement, I guess you'd say, or down in the area we were in earlier. So it's kind of one of those things that we don't need to diminish the importance of a Saturday spent here. And I want us to do something in an exercise in our mind just a moment. Let's just take the number 30. We know that there's 30 young folks, college age and down, that are meeting back there having classes much like this. And some of them mean a lot to us. They may be our own children or maybe from our congregation. We need to kind of switch that thinking just a little bit, because they all mean something to us. Because they're here on a Saturday morning. Had to get up a little bit earlier. Some of them are already out of school, whether it be college or high school. So this is a little bit out of routine. But do with me, if you will, imagine if we brought those 30 young people here and stood them all lined up here. And you could look each one in the face, much like we did many of those in that exercise with the two truths and a lie. And you look those young people in the face and you kind of began to see what relationship you had with them. And then if we went right here in the middle and we moved 15 here and 15 over there. According to statistics across Christian, as Barry talked about, in the religious world, 1/2 of those will not be faithful when they're our age. Now, I want you, as you see those young people, whether coming out of that class or as we're eating, playing games, whatever it may be, or remembering back to this morning eating the donuts, I want you to think about this. I want you to pick half. I want you to pick half that will not be faithful when they get older. That'd be hard to do, wouldn't it? Let me ask you this. My topic is going to be more general than Barry's. Because my topic is, let's say that you divided those. 15 here, 15 there. These will be faithful. These will not. Let me ask you, on these that are not going to be faithful, which one of those are you going to cancel? Because we have that ability. Remember how he said ostracism and all of those other big words that was in that definition and all that? Which one are you going to cancel? And it may be something very simple. It may be an action that you take. It may even be an inaction that you take. Let's look at some passages. I want us to go and understand that these young people are dealing with some things that we have to, and it's some things that happen. Go to 2 Timothy. Nobody in here is unfamiliar with the Word. 2 Timothy, the 2nd chapter, you can't help but remember when you go to those letters written to Timothy, understanding the love that was shown for him, called son, many different times. In that 2nd chapter, at the very start of verse 22, what does it say? Flee also youthful lusts. Now let's look at that part just a moment. There's a group of 30 or so kids back there who are dealing with some things that are peculiar to them. The Bible even says so. There are some things, if you can remember back, as you get older, it's a little harder. As you remember back to when you were a youth, there were some things that were tempting to you at that time that are not now. I want you to think about, we've got lots of age groups here. Think about this. Think about to the time when you were in your youth and what the hot topic was then. It wasn't cancel culture, was it? That's new. Think of a drug maybe. What was, I remember watching LSD and PCP like drug deals. And it's like, you don't even hear that stuff anymore. You know, back before, it was marijuana before that. You know, now there's a big problem with methamphetamine and different stuff like that. So we understand that in things like that, the world changes. Those youthful lusts have changed, but notice, it doesn't matter what year you were born and when you were a youth, and it's very easy. Barry said he had trouble coming up with a lie. A lot of these people didn't. What was the first thing they lied about? Their age, right? No matter what age that you find yourself, 2 Timothy, the 2nd chapter, the 22nd verse, literally for the last couple thousand years has said, flee youthful lust. Those young people are dealing with words like gender neutral, pansexual, and all of those types of words that we may not even know the definition of, right? We didn't deal with. And yet, we have an opportunity through some of those things to cancel some young people not even knowing what they're dealing with. I think about this. We heard about peer pressure all of our lives, no matter what generation you lived in. Some of you, it might have been peer pressure to wear a poodle skirt. There might be some of y'all here that old. And you may have, right? Nothing wrong with it as far as that goes. Might have been bell bottoms. There's probably some of that age here. Now that's come back, so that's kind of a different deal, right? Some of us may have had our hair a little bit longer in the back and put a perm in it, Malcolm. Remember? Right? See? So if those physical things can be peer pressure, those sinful things can as well. What's the big hot topic? You see it on TV everywhere. Homosexuality, right? Well, it's a big thing. Somebody in our communities, they come out of the closet, so to speak, as we call it, and the world, the church especially, freaks out. We react differently. Like he said with the elders, you know, well, I'm one that steals. That's okay. But boy, if there's a problem in a marriage. Homosexuality, that's just not a good thing. The Bible is very clear that yes, it's an abomination, it's a natural use, it's leaving of that. We know that. But what about some of those, very possibly, that are literally down the hallway from us, who are partaking in sexual activity with someone of a different gender? They are just committing fornication. Well, that's just young. They're sowing their wild oats and those types of things. We react differently to one than we do the other. And what happens when any child sees inconsistency in the world that we live, what happens? They rebel. Mamas, daddies, Dad, I want to go to such and such. I want to go do this. No. What do they go do? Hey, Mom, I want to go do this. Do such and such. And what happens if that answer is not consistent? There's rebellion, right? Think about that if you will. There is youthful lust that are there. I want us to go back into 1 Timothy just very quickly since we're there. Like I said, you can't diminish the power of the epistles that were written there. When you get to chapter 4, verse 12, what did he say? Let no man despise thy youth. What do you mean by that? What's the end of that? Notice, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. That's written to a young man. That is a youth. That's the reason we're here today. The instructions are the same. How in the world are they going to be an example if they don't see one? Right? And if they see inconsistency, if they see, and I guess if we're going to leave with something today as a goal for us as parents and preachers and elders and Bible class teachers and all those that are here, is when we're dealing with our youth, it needs to be constant and consistent, right? When it talks about teaching the ways of God, what did he say? Well, when you rise up, when you lay down, when you're going about, bind it as frontlets, as it were, put it before them. That's why these efforts like this today are so important. Because it's just that one more reinforcement. And don't get me wrong, we don't need to diminish, but my Bible and yours says that we've been given all things that pertain to life and godliness, right? We're here today dealing with some things of godliness, but we're going to leave after a while and go back to life. And my kids, now I want you to think about this. I said a while ago that 50% will not be faithful when they get older. I don't know if you noticed or not, but my wife and I both here, we've got 2 sons. If you divide 2 in half, that means, statistically speaking, 1 will not be faithful. Right? Same way here. Try to pick that. When I said divide them in half and try to pick which one's not faithful and which one you're going to cancel, try that on for size. Don't fit very well. And here's the thing, is they need us, not just here today, but they need us each and every day. Not just parents. I want you to think about some things with me as we go through this. Since we're there, let's go to 1 Thessalonians very quickly. I tend to have a theme through mine, and I hope you're going to catch this. We're doing the T books. Thessalonians, Timothy, Titus. That way you don't forget. Or I don't forget. Right? 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. I want us to read here something that is, well, it starts in verse 4. And I can't help but think that this is a good place for us to understand what our responsibility is, not only to the brethren, but also to our young people. Start reading with me out of the 2nd chapter, 1 Thessalonians. Start with me in verse 4. But as we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. For neither at any time used we flattering words, as ye know, nor a cloak of covetousness, God is witness. Nor of men sought we glory, neither of you, not yet of others, when we might have been burdensome, as the apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you, not the gospel of God only, notice, but also our own souls, because ye were dear unto us. For ye remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you, we preached unto you the gospel of God. Notice this. Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holily and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe. Now here, we see him writing to the brethren at Thessalonica. And what does he say? You were dear unto us. We behaved in an orderly manner. We did things that God witnessed that brought him glory in your presence. Guess what? That was written to a group of Christians, and it did not have an age restriction on it. Those kids that are sitting back there need us to behave orderly, and they need to see us do that. Sometimes great reaction is made when homosexuality is talked about, and yet whenever those young folks find themselves in fornication, we don't have a reaction. Same way, maybe that fornication is taking place, but until a child comes out of wedlock, a great reaction isn't made. The Bible requires of us consistency. Barry made mention, sin is sin. And if it separates us, which iniquity does, from the God of heaven, we need to have a reaction to it but it needs to be a reaction with a soul in mind, as Barry put up there a while ago. Because we have before us all things pertaining to life and godliness. They need us as godly Christian examples in this building and out of this building. If you don't think it's important, what can we do? What can we do? You know, my kids are getting older. One's in college, one will be going away next year to college. It's easy to kind of take that breath and say it's over. What about other people's children? We need to make sure that we encourage them as well. Even whenever sin creeps in. Because here's the great thing about sin, and that's something you don't hear very often. Here's the great thing about sin, is we serve a Savior that can take it away. That's what our children need to know. And guess what? You can tell them if they know who you are. If they have followed the example, as it were. I want us to think about, let's go ahead and look at a couple other passages. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians. It's there. 2 Thessalonians in the second. Actually, let's look in the third chapter there. Read in verse 6. See if this doesn't sound very familiar to what he just said in the very first letter. Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us. For yourselves know how ye ought to follow us. For we behaved not ourselves disorderly among you. Now, all of that just helps us to understand that we have an example, yes, here today, but also tomorrow in our worship assemblies, in our respective congregations, and in any other event. And the more our youth see us behaving orderly, the better off we are. And then when sin comes along, we can show them the answer. We've already had an icebreaker thing. I want to petition you that when we are back together with those young people, find one. Maybe it's one that you showed your paper to. Thank them for being here. They need that from you. It may be a situation where you say, well, what more can I do? It is amazing to me how simple things matter. Pick your favorite sport. Maybe the sport that your kids played when they were in school, or maybe that your grandkids play. Find somebody in your home congregation and get the schedule and go watch them play ball. You'd be surprised what $100 worth of pizza and some bag-o boards will do that you can take part in. People say, well, why do we do this? Well, what does the Bible tell us? It says to do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith, right? There's 15 over here that we've canceled because of sin, whatever it may be. That we've become disinterested in because these 15 over here are faithful. We love them. We wrap our arms around them, right? We encourage them. There's 15 souls there as well. And they're young. You know one of the greatest things about being young? Change comes easy. The old saying is you can't teach old dog new tricks. Hey, those young folks, they can adapt. You know how we know that? Look at the last year with COVID. They've done lots of different things that they never thought they would be able to do. And they just adjusted and did whatever sin so easily besets them now, we can get over. Did you notice the we? They may have us to help. If you have a relationship with a young person, guess what the blessing of that is? Sometimes you can reach over and you can pat them on the back. Tell them good job. But then, when needed, you can rear back and give them a swift kick in the drawers as well. And they respect both. Because of things like this. Because just like here with these brethren at Thessalonica, he said, for yourselves know how ye ought to follow us, for we behave not ourselves disorderly among you. There are many people who come into an assembly and they check the box. I was there. What about those of that 15 who statistically are not going to be faithful when they're older? Did you check a box for them? Or did you cancel them? Remember, the Bible tells us the Jews were warned against it over and over again. About so easily seeing that tiny speck that is in the brother's eye. And yet here we're walking around with a beam in ours. And some say, well, I don't partake in homosexuality. Good. Because it's iniquity that separates. No matter where we find ourselves, we know that whether on this side with the group of 15 who will be faithful when they get older, or over here with the 15 who, well, let's just boil it down as simple as can, are on a fast track to eternity in hell. Where's our priority? It's to both. It's to both. And we oftentimes focus here. And yes, they need us. But we need to understand. I said we was going to read from Titus. Let's do so. Titus chapter 2. If you don't think that you have an example, if you don't think that you need to be an example, let's just read Titus chapter 2. But speak thou the things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, and patience. The aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. Notice verse 4, ladies, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Let me help you understand what's being said there. There are a lot of people in the world, there's even a movement in the Lord's church that want women standing in that pulpit right there, standing up here waiting on the Lord's table. And if you do that, you are diminishing the role of women, because notice what it says to do. Notice, women, what it tells you. Be that example to those younger women so that Barry's topic doesn't have to be discussed anymore. If we do it on this end, if we reach out to those souls, those young souls, bringing them back to the cross of Christ, having sins forgiven, making them be a part of that 30 that are going to heaven, not canceling any of those, guess what? Barry doesn't have to give his lesson anymore. He don't have to deal with it at the next congregation like the 4 he's been at already. Right? Why? Because they were taught. Who taught them? The aged women. That's what it says right here. Men, you're not off the hook. You're not off the hook, men. Read back through those things that the aged men, sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, and charity, and patience. There's a few verses in there that talk to the women. Then we get to verse 6. Young men, likewise, exhort to be sober-minded. What was the first thing? that he said that the aged men need to be sober. Those are hard topics. If you don't think example is important, read verse 7, young men. In all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine, showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech that cannot be condemned, and that he is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you. Why? Why is that possible? By example. So let me ask you, go back to that group. 15 over here, 15 over there. You get to pick which one's going to be faithful. Quite literally. Quite literally, you're going to get to pick. Because oftentimes the ones that go away is because even though it's a fairly new term, they've been canceled by those that fill the pews inside a body that wears the name Church of Christ, but does not give the example that Jesus Christ did. Barry mentioned some of those things. What did he say? He sat down with some and said, go and sin no more. Notice he didn't give her a free pass. Go and sin no more. Yes, what you did was sin. Can't you imagine if you went over here in this group of 15 and say, look, what you're doing is wrong. Let's find the way out. Let's move away from that. In Barry's example, did you notice when he was talking about the ones with the elders, what he threw something in there? The practicing kleptomaniac, right? Let me ask you this. We have a great example, the most prolific writer in the entirety of New Testament, who was a practicing what? What's a good word? Huh? That's a good one. He was a practicing terrorist. I like that word. That was a buzzword a few years ago, wasn't it? We don't hear so much about it now, right? He was a practicing terrorist. What changed? He quit practicing. He still had the zeal, but he had the correct knowledge. Those young people needed you here today. Thank you. They're going to need you tomorrow and next Tuesday. And at their ball games this winter when they're playing basketball again. Or maybe this summer when they're out there and, yeah, it's going to be 90 degrees, but swing by. It's that important. Because according to statistics, 15 of those young souls back there will not enter into heaven. You get to pick which 15.